The interesting thing about lithium is that it's got a type of consensus that we call proof of performance that is sort of unlike any other consensus in that we pay for all the functions that the blockchain needs, and therefore we think that we can escape from this trilemma problem and we can potentially deliver blockchain decentralization and all the cool stuff that that comes with to the entire world so that people can use the blockchain every day without compromising at all on the security or the costs or the decentralization.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
Tokenmetrics AI analyzes millions of data points to uncover hidden gems, delivering buy and sell signals you can trust. Our AI spots tokens before they moon, helping you stay ahead in the fast-paced crypto world. Join tens of thousands of investors who have taken their portfolios to the moon and beyond.
We are in the final stages, the home run of the bull market, where valuations go insane and millions can be made. And where you're going to make the most is with good quality, low cap projects. And I'm going to be talking about one in this video. Hi, everybody, it's Crypto Rich, working with you to get rich with crypto, filling our pockets with altcoin profits. I'm joined by Clayton. Clayton is the CEO of Lithium.com. We're going to find out all about that. Now, before I introduce him, please subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Oh, follow me on X. Why am I still saying Twitter? Follow me on X, Crypto Rich YT. Join my official Telegram announcements channel. And if you're watching this on YouTube, come and support my work on ODYSEE, 3Speak, and Rumble. Hey, Clayton, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And you're the CEO, right?
Yeah, I'm the CEO, founder. I'm more on the technical side, so probably leaning CTO heavy, but I've got some folks to help on sort of the other aspects of that as well.
Okay, and so what is Lithium? And I'll have the links in the description below. So what is Lithium.com?
Yeah, Lithium is a layer one blockchain. So it's we were founded about 3 years ago, and we've been building in stealth mode for a few years, and we've just hit a test net, so we're starting to put ourselves out there a bit. But the interesting thing about Lithium is that it's got a type of consensus that we call proof of performance that is sort of unlike any other consensus in that we pay for all the functions that the blockchain needs, and therefore we think that we can escape from this trilemma problem and we can potentially deliver blockchain decentralization and all the cool stuff that that comes with to the entire world so that people can use the blockchain every day without compromising at all on the security or the costs or the decentralization like people typically believe in the trilemma paradigm.
Okay, that's interesting. I was going to ask you about the trilemma. I'm sure I've come across that before and it hasn't registered. So security, decentralization, and cost. And I suppose ease of
scale
use as well.
Say again?
Ease of use as well, because with the greater the security, not necessarily the easier to use.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting point of view. The whole scale thing, I think, affects so much, including usability. But honestly, the trilemma, I'll just give you a little bit of the history of that. So it was introduced by Vitalik in a blog post where he was introducing using sharding for scaling Ethereum. Mm-hmm. I think the name of the post was Sharding Demystified, and he put those three things on the triangle, and security was just like keeping the chain, I think, synchronized or something like this, right? And it was never really part of the conversation after that. It was just one of the three things, but like you could never give it up. So it was kind of like, honestly, just complicating the issue a bit more. And we had already been through years of the debate on the Bitcoin side about scale versus decentralization. So to me, it just kind of muddied the waters a bit, but then it's just sort of become the name that everyone used to refer to the choice of scale versus decentralization. So it really is a dilemma, but we say trilemma. And we can deep dive on that blog post if you want.
Well, no,
one of the things
I don't want to get too technical, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not that technical. That's the thing. I mean, it's just sort of that he defined decentralization as typically interpreted to mean that the node has to run on a laptop, and it wasn't very rigorous, right? It was just sort of like he just put that out there, and that's sort of, I think, how a lot of people treat this concept of decentralization, that it has to run on a laptop. But when you think about like what do we want as end users, it's like you want the privacy, you want the sovereignty, you want the uncensorability. That doesn't necessarily need to run on a laptop, and I think that's why Vitalik chose those words. He said it's typically interpreted that way, and not that it is that way. Right. So I think you can get to a more fundamental understanding of the origin of this dilemma But yeah, I mean, Vitalik's such a big mind share in the space that he sort of gets to name these things.
Yes. Well, I suppose it's a way of balancing those three things: decentralization, security, and was the other one, was it cost?
Well, you can think of it as cost, but yeah, it's scale really. But
Yeah. Okay.
it's interesting that you say cost because it does come down to cost, right? It's that you, and this is sort of where we get into the lithium, the fundamental thing. We were calling it full decentralization. Now we call it true decentralization. We might have to come up with another name, but basically, it's a concept that you have these different functions that the blockchain needs to perform. And on Bitcoin, I don't know if you've heard the term full node, or in Solana and Ethereum space, they call them RPC nodes. And there's like Infura and Alchemy that provide RPCs, and the dApps usually pay for these things. Those aren't incentivized, right? And so there's kind of a different game that has to get played that's not consensus. It's actually kind of just a business model that's wrapped around the dApp in order to get those things to be paid for. And it's keeping those costs low is the reason that you will compromise the decentralization if you fail to do that, right? So you can think of it the same way in a sense, right? That like the scale is dangerous to the decentralization because of the costs of the unincentivized parts of the blockchain. If
Okay.
that makes
Now,
sense.
yeah, it sort of ish. My concern is if we're getting too technical, right? Because the people
Yeah.
who watch my channel are, because I do a mixture of news and politics and stuff, right? Are people who
Hmm.
want to get into a good quality project in order to maximize the return on their investment. Like they want to
Yeah.
make the next big thing.
Well,
So
I came up with an interesting analogy. Maybe this would
yeah,
work for you. I haven't told this to anybody yet, but it's just an idea I had a week ago. Imagine there's a street where you can get your car washed, and there's like 100 different car washes, right? But they're like some kind of AI car wash, right? And it's actually free. You can just drive in, and there's like a robot that does everything. But you have to buy soap and buy towels, and then the soap will go into the car wash, and the robots use the towels or whatever. And so every one of these 100 shops, they have both a shop where you can buy soap and towels, and then they have the robots that clean your thing. Any clever businessman would be like, well, I'm just going to sell the soap and the towels, right? And skip the other part because it's not paid for. And that's sort of what you have going on in the blockchain space. You've got these critical functions like sharing data to wallets and sharing blocks around the chain and sharing like what we call peer-to-peer data. So like if you say like, I want to connect to the network, well, how do you know what are all the different nodes in the network? One of the nodes has to tell you about the other nodes, right? So all those things are not paid for by the consensus, right? The only thing that in the case of Bitcoin is paid for is the hashing or the validating in the case of Ethereum. And so you just have these other costs that are just like, you have to keep them low because volunteers have to provide them basically. Or it has to be such a low cost that the validators and the miners are kind of just willing to provide it for free. And this is the origin of the whole trilemma thing. And
okay,
that's why it's so limited.
okay. Now lithium is
Hmm.
a layer one, which for people who don't
Yeah.
know, Bitcoin is not layer one. Bitcoin is just a coin. It's digital gold. You pass around. Pirate Chain is private. Monero, private digital gold. You just pass around. You can't build anything on them. Ethereum, Solana, Atom, different structure. They are layer ones in as much as you can build applications and have those applications perform different functions. So you can have projects that are built on Ethereum. You can have projects that are built on Solana. You can have currencies that are built on Solana or Ethereum. So similarly, lithium is a layer one using proof of performance. But before you even get to it, I mean, Clayton, why another layer one? Come on. There's so many already. It's such a crowded
Yeah.
field.
That's a great question. I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago called "Why a Layer One" in 2023. Now it's I guess we have to update the title of that, but yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, right? There's no fundamental solution to this, and to me, it's existential, right? There was I don't know how long you've been in the industry, but there was a big change that happened in 2017 that once upon a time we were all together and everybody was a Bitcoiner, and even people that supported Ethereum or some other chain, Monero or whatever you like, they were Bitcoiners first. And one of the things we like to say is like, whatever those other chains discover, we'll just do it on Bitcoin, right?
Mm.
And it was cool because there was no infighting. And when new people came to the community, it was like, oh, one of us, and we all tried to educate everybody. And it was such a great feeling of camaraderie. And it was us against the world. And Jamie Dimon was talking shit about blockchain in the New York Times or wherever it was, Bloomberg. And when the blocks got full in 2017, that split everybody apart. And that's sort of where we're at now. And the reality is that Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think they're legitimately understood to be the most trustworthy and the most decentralized because they have the lowest RPC costs. But that also means they can only do 1 million transactions per day. And so how do you deliver this wonderful technology to every corner of the world, to the people who actually really need it, in the little places in the world that don't have access to the global financial system, who would love a line of credit or whatever to be able to sell their goods around the world, without some intermediary bank gangster, trying to take their cut. You just can't do that, right? And then there's all these solutions, but you have to remember, we say not your keys, not your coins, right? The only way to really own your Bitcoin is to hold the private key. And so if you're going through some centralized service and you're just clearing to your local currency, you're not getting that benefit. And so to me, it's like, it's a big problem for the industry if we can't solve it in a fundamental way, and I do believe in like all those, I like a lot of the projects that you talk to actually, which is why I reached out to you, because I'm friends with the Secret Network guys and I saw your interview on Pirate Chain. And I think it's important to deliver those solutions, but we need to deliver them at scale, right? Like my mom's not going to use some altcoin. It's just not really realistic. So, and also it affects the user experience too when you don't have scale, because you're constantly worrying about this gas cost thing. And it's just like, I'm digging into that too deeply, but like, if you look at liquidity pools and the automatic market making, it's a much worse user experience than just like a normal market with order books and things like this. So I think people say we need a lot more developers, but I think we need a lot more compute for the developers. And then the developers will be justified and they'll come because they'll be like, oh, there's a platform that can support my vision. Right.
Yeah, no, we definitely, the transaction fees are an issue. And I was around, I started my channel in April 2017. So I was around when there was a split between Bitcoin and block sizes, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold, and all Bitcoin SV and all the other.
That was a tragic time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also the ICO boom. And then what happened with Ethereum when it was
right.
$100 in transaction fees to move $50 worth of Ethereum, right? So then how does lithium
prices out a lot of things, right? You have Uniswap and you have Aave and all that, but then somebody builds something fun and cool like CryptoKitties and it starts to go viral, but it fills the whole blockchain and then kills itself, right? Because nobody wants to pay $100 fee for a $5 kitty. It doesn't make sense, right? So there's just certain things that are priced out, and that's what I hope Lithium can help, is like all these DApp developers who have some brilliant idea to build like the decentralized Facebook or the decentralized Reddit or the decentralized YouTube. You understand about that issue. I was watching some of your early videos, or what is now your earlier videos. I love YouTube, but like they're censoring everybody too. It's ridiculous, right? We need to like deliver free speech to people, but how do you do that on a platform that's so limited, right? That's the big question.
Yep.
So,
okay, so then what is proof of performance? How does Lithium address all this?
Yeah, well, I'm not getting too technical on you. In a long story short, we unify those two things, right? So you have, is it possible for me to share my screen real quick and just show a little slide? So yeah, on this slide, what we have is showing the difference in the impact of the difference in incentives in these consensuses, right? And what you have is somewhere between 10 and $100 billion worth of hashing that's happening on Bitcoin. But then they're very proud of the fact that you can run a so-called full node on a Raspberry Pi, which is like a $20 or $30 device. And you can plug that in your commodity home internet. And so you've got like 100,000 or 1 million times difference in the capital outlay for these two things that the blockchain does, which are both critical to its function, right? And it's the lack of incentives on the right-hand side that cause the scalability issue. And you have sort of a similar thing on the Ethereum side, right? You've got something like 10 to $100 billion of Ethereum that's staked, and people are running the validators collateralized by that. But then they're proud that you can run a full node or an RPC node on what they're calling one little NUC boy. And the image I have in this slide is from a meme that was from the Ethereum community where they were saying, who would win in a fight, the global financial system or one little NUC boy, this $800 mini PC. So they're very proud of the limit to the thing, but obviously, and that does make it more decentralized in a sense, but it's also obviously limiting, right? And so what we're doing at Lithium is we're just unifying those two things. So we're saying, because every blockchain needs a difficulty, right? In order to design the consensus, you need something that sort of acts as a disincentive for the miners from acting outside of the consensus, right? So everyone's trying to do the same thing, and it's somewhat difficult. You can sort of think of it that way, and you collateralize it in the case of like a proof of stake system where it's virtualized difficulty. You could think of it that way. But the difficulties in other chains are just difficult for the sake of being difficult. They don't do anything else. And so the insight that we have to create proof of performance is to take those costs which are not paid for and use those as the difficulty. So it's the chain providing data, which is the thing that the nodes have to do in order to make a block. And then that sort of, one way to think about it is it empowers the wallets to force the chain to give them data. So like the way we measure our difficulty is actually in the fees and the transactions. So you can just say like, you can just think of it as you need like at least 1,000 transactions to make a block, as an example. They're actually dynamically sized, but just as an example, you can think of, some number of transactions that you need. But in order to get the wallets to send you the transactions, you're going to need to give them some data. And then once they send you the transactions, the data is signed, and that signed data is included in the transactions and then sent back. Sorry, a little technical, but long story short, what you get is a chain that, as it scales, it also becomes more secure, right? Instead of having people deploy hash, they deploy the type of compute you would need to make a blockchain, right? Like the networking and the CPU to do the signature validation and the memory to store the EVM state and all those things. And then as the chain grows, the node, the amount you have to invest in a node goes greater and greater and greater and greater. And it remains decentralized.
So if I can simplify it, and I don't understand a lot of what you said, right, to be perfectly honest, but then I don't know how a fridge works. I don't know how a car works, but I know what the final outcome is, right? Yeah. And the final outcome of a fridge is my food is kept cool and lasts longer.
Right.
So then what I understand from what you're saying is that with lithium, and it was when you said that as there's more and more data, then it becomes more and more secure, which I can completely get. Right. That's the proof of performance. Similarly, because I also what we do as human beings is whenever we come across something new, we compare it to what we already know. And I know with Pirate Chain, the more and more transactions there are, the more anonymous and private and secure it becomes. Because it's like the haystack thin gets larger and larger, the needle is hidden in. So with lithium, the larger and larger and larger and larger and larger the data gets, the more efficient it becomes, the way that it's constructed.
Maybe not more efficient, but more, think about Bitcoin, right?
More secure.
You've got $100 billion of hash.
Secure.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's incredible.
Yeah, but it's not efficient. You wouldn't say it's efficient. So
thank you.
I guess the difference is Bitcoin, as it gets more secure, it gets less efficient, right? You're using $100 billion to secure something that only does 1 megabyte every 10 minutes, right? But with lithium, it actually stays fairly steady, right? So the efficiency kind of stays dialed into like something you would think about is more comparable to like an Amazon. It's a decentralized Amazon, so you still need more nodes. Like you want to have 10,000 nodes to call it decentralized. Whereas if you're on Amazon, you can have maybe like one front end and then like a couple of redundant servers or something. So it's still going to be more expensive than a cloud solution, but it should be like if you look at the performance per dollar on blockchains, it's like about 1 million times off of what you would get per dollar on AWS, right? So there's a huge opportunity there if you can get past that trilemma problem.
Okay. All right. Well okay. Let's move this on.
And with Pirate Chain, another thing to think about is imagine. I think what he's saying is definitely true, right? Because it's needle in a haystack. But there's still going to be a limit to the size of the haystack. Like imagine you take the Pirate Chain concept and you combine it with the lithium concept. Now you've got a haystack that's like 1,000 times even bigger than what a Pirate Chain could maybe deliver, right? Okay. So it's like we enhance all the other things that cool people are trying to do with this concept, I think.
Okay. Well, that leads us on to something else, which is that you're, just from a brief look at the website, that there's also privacy aspects to lithium. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, we're still EVM compatible at the moment, and we're waiting to see what we can sneak in before mainnet. So I'd like to do something like a ZK VM, or there's garbled circuit VMs now that are out there they seem really cool. And actually, I met one of those one of the people doing that through our friends at Secret Network. But in the EVM space, it's still early games. So that was the whole RISC-V thing that Vitalik was talking about, was really just people taking an EVM and running it in a RISC-V, a ZK VM running RISC-V. RISC-V is just an instruction set, so it's a type of virtual machine. But like you want to do the ZK at the EVM. You don't want to have the EVM and then another virtual machine under that's then doing the ZK stuff, right? You'd really just rather have one VM that does everything you want to do. So it's a little early for that technology, unfortunately. There's a lot of cool chains out there though doing stuff along that line. So I'm pretty sure that in the next 6 to 12 months we're going to have something that's very cool. The Soda Lab guys are doing the I think it's a garbled circuit EVM, but that's a fork of Geth, and Lithium is using Rust, so we can't use that tech. And I'm not aware of anybody forking REVM, which is the Rust-based EVM, to add privacy features yet. But REVM is only in production for like a year, so
All right.
we should be seeing that stuff soon. I mean, people love Rust, right? It's just that there's a little history lesson there too. The whole
Hold on,
Rust-based
Clayton.
EVM stuff
Hold on,
is
Clayton.
very interesting, but
Hold on, Clayton. Forgive me, right? Because this is getting way too technical. And I want this to be a general overview, right? So Rust is a blockchain language. EVMs are cryptocurrencies that use...
EVM is the machine that runs
Ethereum.
Smart contracts,
On Ethereum.
right? That Ethereum created, but it's used by many. So there's like this concept of EVM compatibility. So Arbitrum, Base, and BNB. Yeah, there's a ton that are EVM compatible. So we kind of view that as like the JavaScript of blockchains, right? It's a lot of people criticize the EVM, but it's kind of become the standard, and you can get some scalability gains by choosing a different VM. But we see that as sort of the wrong bottleneck, right? It's like if you can get 1,000 times gain by fixing the consensus, but you skip out on a 50% gain because you have the wrong VM, it's maybe not the end of the world, and you can always fix it later, right? But right now, everyone wants to do Solidity, and it's sort of the king. So, and it's good enough.
Okay, all right. So then, what are the transaction fees? What's so special about Lithium that anybody should want to?
Well, the transaction fees are going to be pushed to the physical boundary at the bottom, right? So it's sort of like asking how much hash does a Bitcoin have, in a sense, because we can't really say what it will be, but it will be, pushed to the point where we can incentivize like 10,000 runners to show up and run the network, and then they're going to have to be satisfied with the price they're getting in order to incentivize them to run the node. But they play a little game in our difficulty adjustment algorithm where we adjust the price such that it's profitable for everybody. You have a challenge when you want to make the block size dynamic, because you have the price becomes part of that calculation, and you have a different desires between different players, right? The users want a low price, but the miners or the runners in our case want a high price, and so you have to have a game that's played between those two, where you get you sort of incentivize the behavior you want, but then constrained by finding some balance between the two. And that's I'm going to be making a video on that in the future. It's part of our difficulty adjustment algorithm. But yeah, it's, what we can say is we guarantee that it's going to be lower than any other chain, and that like theoretically Lithium has, can scale well beyond any other chain, just because we have, potentially 100,000 or 1,000,000x, performance increase in the.
And then some of the other EVMs like Matic, I know, are just ridiculously cheap. And what you're saying, that you're going to be, what I'm hearing is you're going to be much, much cheaper and possibly faster than them, right? Now, we'll find out.
Well,
or similar, right? But definitely a whole lot cheaper than Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Well, here's the thing. Because of the way that those consensuses are designed, you have a hard limit. So in the case of Ethereum, it's 30 million gas right now per block. And when the demand is less than that, you have like a perfectly elastic sort of economic situation where, there's more than enough space for everybody on the boat. So the price of a ticket goes to like zero, right? But once the boat is full and everyone's trying to get on, then the prices like can skyrocket. It's perfectly inelastic, right? It doesn't matter how much people are willing to pay. The supply, in a sense, never goes up. It's always 30 million gas per block, or in Bitcoin, it's like whatever it is, 1.2 virtual megabytes per block or whatever, right? So you have this situation where like occasionally it'll be nearly free, but then when the bull cycle comes, it gets really, really expensive. And then you have these other chains that are just spilling out like proof of authority, or they're just pretending it's not a problem. And yes, it's cheap from the fees, but then you have to ask yourself, like, what are the RPC costs and who's paying for that, right? So it's a little more tricky than just looking at the gas price. And this is a big challenge for Lithium, because it's like, how do you help people to understand that they don't necessarily want the cheapest thing, right? Although we do think ours is going to be the cheapest, it's like you want the most decentralized thing also, right? There's no point paying for it if you're just really on Amazon and is masquerading as a blockchain.
Yes. No. We want true decentralization because that's what allows for freedom. Okay. And
Right.
when is mainnet launching?
So we're targeting Q3. I think we're going to have feature complete, like ready for mainnet by that time. But depending on what we're able to accomplish as far as traction in the next 3 months, may change our strategy and how we want to launch things. So yeah, I guess I'll have to say keep an eye on the project for a better answer on that. But we'll at least have some clarity in Q3, whether that means we're launching in Q3 or we're giving a date. I'm hoping to have some more solid answers for you there.
Okay. And then what are the features like of lithium?
Well, it's just EVM compatible, right? So I mean, you can do anything. It's. I mean, one thing to understand about a VM is it's a general purpose machine, right? And so anything you want to do, you can do, right? I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing privacy features all on top of EVM. Right? You can program the privacy into a Solidity contract. The problem is it's massively expensive,
Right.
right? So this is what I keep saying about this scale problem is it affects everything, and people just keep saying, oh, we need more developers, we need better user experience, we need better privacy, and it's like, yeah, but nobody's willing to pay for it. There's not enough space on the blockchain. All people are willing to do is Aave and Uniswap and Bungee Exchange or whatever, and everything else is priced out. Like I don't know if you've heard of Gnosis Wallet, but it's this amazing wallet that's like actually a smart contract, and you could do like 2 of 3 signatures, and it's great for doing like project treasuries, but also I'd love to set up one for like my family, but it's more expensive. You know what I mean? If I just use my Trezor and I have one key, then it's like less than half the price. If I want to set up one of these smart contract wallets that has these extra security features, it costs more, right? So it's like we're constantly compromising on all these things because the scale is just so ridiculously limited.
Okay. All right. And then why would anybody want to move their project over from wherever it is or duplicate it or set it up also on lithium? Um,
Yeah,
what are the advantages?
that's a great question. Well, for one, we're EVM compatible, right? So it doesn't. There's not a ton of overhead to if you're already doing Solidity and you're already in these other ecosystems. You really just have to reconfigure your hard hat a little bit, and then you can deploy directly in the normal way. The other reason is we think it's going to be a permanent ecosystem, right? Like you're never going to be like what happened with CryptoKitties. You know, like they deploy on Ethereum, it's greatly successful, but then it gets priced out, right? That should never happen on Lithium. The other thing is you don't have RPC costs, right? Because the RPC costs are the difficulty. They are provided sort of for free by the network. And it's not so much that it's free, but that it's like we're making the runners do that to secure the chain. And as a side effect of that, you get free service, right? So like if you're looking at the Solana ecosystem as a dApp developer, they tell you like you can pay for your RPCs through one of these RPC providers like Helios, and there's a bunch of other ones out there that are kind of subsidized by the Solana Foundation in a way also. And once you get to a certain level, you may want to pay for your Arno RPC nodes, right? And so those costs are in a high scale chain like Solana, they're quite expensive, right? We're talking $3,000 to $10,000 per month, something like this, for the backend for your dApp, right? Obviously, on Ethereum, it's cheaper, but you're still sort of the problem. Even when it's cheap, is it's still sort of centralized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this issue. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but you know, if you look at your MetaMask, it's configured to hit this company called Infura, who owns MetaMask. It's Consensus, which is owned by Joe Lubin, who was one of the Ethereum Foundation founders. And you know that Infura just tells your wallet what the data is, right? So you're trusting Infura to give you the correct answer when you ask for your balance or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like we threw out the baby with the bathwater, and they're still trying to recover it in the Ethereum space, and they're calling it data availability, and they're hoping ZKs can solve this. But again, you end up with the same issue where it's like there's who's going to pay for it, right? And then the other thing is, so when you're on Uniswap.com, your MetaMask is talking to Infura, but your Web3.js that's running in your Uniswap is talking to Uniswap.org. So Uniswap.org is running an Ethereum node, and they have to extract a little bit of extra fees in order to pay for the Uniswap Foundation, so they can pay for those services. And again, you're trusting some node that's being run by Uniswap.org. So that offers not only a cost to the dApp developer, but also a risk, right? It's like now, if that node gets hacked, you're told your brand could be totally destroyed, right? Because now all your users could be getting hacked for like a day until you figure out the problem, just because they're all relying on a server that it's your responsibility to secure, right? I mean, you better hire a sysadmin, right? You better make sure all your Linux packages are up to date, right? And you're not getting owned by some hacker or something. So
Okay.
we solve a lot of those problems.
Oh, which are technical problems which would appeal to, I suppose, developers and coders and everything. What about for
Right.
people for the for I suppose let's start with institutions.
Yeah.
What's attractive to them about lithium?
Well, I'll be honest, at this stage, we are trying to just focus on getting that message out to the app developers. And sorry for being a bit technical, but
Mhm.
we need to get the developers, and then they're going to help us answer that question, hopefully, right? We build the awesome platform, the app developers build the awesome experiences and the awesome solutions. But ultimately, we think that lithium can be the most secure chain because it's also the most highly scalable, right? Which is ironic because everybody thinks those things go against each other. But when you get rid of the problems, the opposite is actually true, right? Because all of the security for a chain, like everybody understands that Bitcoin is the most secure because it has the most hashing, right? It's that $100 billion that's behind the mining that's securing it. And if you wanted to like take over Bitcoin, you'd need to deploy your own $100 billion worth of hashing, and then you'd have 51%, and you could attack it, right? But where does the incentive come from for the miners to deploy that much collateral? Well, it comes from the value of Bitcoin and the perceived value that we're then inflating some away and capturing that from the whole community. And it also comes from the fees. So all the incentive for securing the chain ultimately is derived from providing value to the end users, the end users being willing to pay for that value, whether they're holding and you're inflating or whether they're using and you're charging a fee. You have to extract it from them. And then you give that to the miners or the validators or the runners. And the more of them you have, the more secure your chain is. And so if you're able to get past that hump and deliver a high scale chain, it can also be the most secure.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And then there's a problem, I think, with the network effect because there's so many other layer ones. How are you going to get
Right.
yourself to get noticed and stand out?
Well, that's where you come in, Rich. You're going to help me push it out there.
Oh,
Yeah,
dear.
that's the big challenge. But no, I mean we've got a great BD team, and we're going to be expanding our marketing this year. But we want to grow organically, and we're not trying to do one of these high capital plays where we like attract 1,000 developers with grant programs and hackathons and just throw money at them and then like pretend that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread and then disappear in 6 months, right? This is a very common story. We want organic people who believe in the vision, and it's going to mean a little bit more slow growth, but it's also going to mean more, I think, organic growth. And that's actually why I thought of you, Rich, because I I was subscribed to you for years because you had covered another project that I was involved with, and then you started talking to Tom Longo and Alex. I forgot Alex's last name. Yes, and I had seen them on some podcasts with Marty Armstrong, and I'm just I'm one of those folks too. I've got my silver coins, and I'm an expat and all this stuff. So I was like, hey, this is a crypto guy. Like I should ping him.
Well, thank you.
And so yeah, so we're more about quality than quantity, and trying to find the right people to get the message out there. And if we're not in like the top 100 crypto next year, it's not the end of the world. But
Sure.
I think we
Well,
we
and I
deserve
think
to be. But yeah,
and I think the market is so large and getting larger that even if you're in the top 300 or the top 500, I mean,
oh my gosh,
have a look, Clayton. When you've got nothing to do, right? Go have a look at Coin Market Cap in 2013, right? And you see like
yeah.
whatever happened to those projects, right? Like
Well, it gives me a lot of
Feathercoin.
confidence too, because what I like to do is scroll down till there's like some kind of absurd valuation. Like, all right, this project's worth $10 billion, and then I go in and I drill into it, and I'm like, this is garbage. Like we could be worth $10 billion, no
Okay.
problem.
Well, I
So
hope
it's both disheartening, but also it's inspiring too, and it's a challenge, and it's I think we
yes.
can make it. But that is the biggest challenge for lithium, actually, is getting people to understand why it's superior, and getting them to cross the chasm, right? Because you've got to bridge over or whatever, and it's a big ask.
Yes, and just about the garbage, right? I hope you don't include in that the very apogee, the pinnacle of blockchain development, which are coins with a dog's face on it. That was Satoshi's original vision.
Uh,
That's what it's all
well,
about.
we
Has
can,
your coin got a
yeah,
dog's face? No. Well, it's rubbish then.
yeah.
Okay, moving on from dog face coins. What's the appeal for a retail investor, and how can they get involved?
um, that's a good question. I mean, to me, it's more about the technology than the investment, right? And that the investment sort of is secondary. Um, we're not here to really tout get rich quick schemes and things like this, but it is, we do have a pretty humble valuation at this point. I can throw some numbers out there for you. We're actually pushing out press releases in the next couple of days. So we've raised 750K at just a $25 million valuation. And to me, it's like, it's a big number, but it's very modest, I would say. So, yeah, there's still a lot.
You're not going to go for the hundreds. And was it, how much did EOS raise? Was it $1 billion? And where's EOS now with their $1 billion?
Yeah. Well, I'm always shocked by how much money these projects manage to get and then not really get much results. And I think, that's why it's a focus on organic for us. Obviously, we could do more if we had more cash, and we are hoping to do another raise this year. But I do think we can also get to mainnet with our current team and our current resources. So, and then obviously along with that will come a token launch at some point. We may be doing something called a bonding curve offering, which is sort of a automatic market making type of a thing, where it's kind of a private market that's just controlled by the project for like a month or two, and then it gets released fully publicly onto like a decentralized exchange. But we're being, I guess, a little bit picky about who we work with too, because the VCs, they have their game, and the centralized exchanges, they have their game, and it doesn't always align with the founder's long-term vision for a better decentralized future.
Sure.
And
which brings, how are you funded currently?
well, I've been bootstrapping it for a while, so I was involved with some other projects that did fairly well, and then like I said, we raised money in the last 6 months through a couple of VCs, one based in Geneva called AlphaMe, and then Amber Group in Singapore, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they're in the market making space, and they have a bunch of structured products, and I think they're one of the largest funds in Asia. So we're quite proud to be part of their portfolio. And then they also invited us to their accelerator. They have a new accelerator called Amber AC, and so they're supporting us there as well. So
okay, and your token launch, when will that be roughly? Third quarter?
Yeah, again, it's the same kind of answer with the mainnet. We really don't want to do the token launch prior to mainnet. We think that's a little bit of a shady, scammy move. We're not necessarily totally against doing it. We know we're honest, and we are going to get to mainnet. I just want to make sure that we, if we did something like that, we have to back it up, and we just don't think it's a great look. So we want to have at least a mainnet launch like on the calendar before we launch the token. But hopefully more answer for you on that in Q3 this year.
Okay. And if people want to get involved or find out about the project, I'll have the link to your website.
Yeah.
There's X and there's Telegram and.
Yeah. So the big things we're going to be doing prior to mainnet are two phases of what we call testnet. So phase one is the builders program, and it's all about the dApp development, and that's sort of what we've soft launched that already, and we're going to be officially launching it in a week or two. And it's sort of something where you can earn points for deploying on the network, or just using the testnet, sending some transactions or whatever. So that's one way to get involved. The other way is what we're calling phase two, which is the runners. So that's once all the incentives are working for the proof of performance consensus, and you can like run a node and sort of learn, if I were running this hardware, what would I be able to earn? And then, obviously phase three is when it's mainnet, and you can actually use it as an end user and potentially get involved with the token.
Okay. And is there anything else you want to let us know before we finish up?
I think we covered everything. Yeah. Like I said, we just started testnet. Builders program is going live. Look for that. We just started also producing a bunch of video content. So we've got deep dives, which are all about lithium. We've got one called Decode, where we're just trying to explain consensus stuff to a general audience. And then we've got the pod, where we just sort of discuss recent stuff like the RISC-V thing that was going on. And we're going to be doing AMAs soon. And we've got the best ways to follow us are the Twitter, or the X, and our Telegram channel.
Great. Okay. Well, I shall link to all those in the description below. And thank you so much, Clayton. Really, really appreciate it. And
thank you too, Rich.
Interested, please check this out. You're in very, very early. And that is very, very smart. But do your own due diligence. By the way, nothing I say here or in any other video should be taken as investment advice. So, but do check things out. All right. Clayton, really, really appreciate it. And between now and when I see you next, Everybody, please share this video far and wide and keep filling your pockets with crypto profits. Crypto Rich and Crypto Clayton signing out. All the best. Bye bye.